Right, so whilst we are somewhat preoccupied with general election doings here in the UK, we mustn't take our eyes off what is happening in the Middle East, where Israel has once more rejected another ceasefire plan. Not that you'll hear that from UK and most notably US politicians or any of the associated media. They'd rather blame Hamas for everything going wrong, despite them accepting the deal whilst requesting some reassurances. I'll cover it in another video though. What is becoming a bigger issue for Israel directly right now, and the content of this video, has been the escalating actions coming from Hezbollah in Lebanon, who have been supporting Hamas since Israel's invasion of Gaza on October the 8th, which began as low-scale strikes, has now grown into hundreds of missiles being fired into Israel daily, to the point it is becoming a question of where Israel will have to concentrate its forces most of all now. Carrying on its genocide in Gaza to the south, or to their northern border, where Lebanon is raining fire down upon them in retaliation. But one particular strike by Israel on Lebanon has people scratching their heads too as to just how hard up for weaponry the Israeli army might now be on the Lebanese border. Right, so we've gone from a couple of kids being injured by some broken glass to literally hundreds of missiles being fired into Israel by Hezbollah in retaliation for one of their senior commanders getting killed. And while for obvious reasons the focus has been on Gaza and what Israel have done there these past 9 months, it should be noted that for that entire span of time, Lebanon has been striking Israel too in support of Gaza, much as the Houthis in Yemen have been doing since last November. Within that first week, Hezbollah, for example, targeted IDF vehicles and personnel at a known Israeli position and other Israeli positions in the Sheba Farms region, so called for the farms that historically existed there, but which is actually contested territory between Lebanon and Syria these days, and lies between Lebanon and the occupied Syrian territory of the Golan Heights. In retaliation, Israel used white phosphorus in this region against Lebanese civilians, destroyed UNIFIL headquarters in southern Lebanon, UNIFIL being the UN peacekeeping organisation based in Lebanon that helped the Lebanese army patrol and document incidents occurring along their border, and they also killed a Lebanese Reuters journalist called Issam Abdallah. And that was just week one. The one thing above all else that has stood out for many people is the indiscriminacy of Israeli targets, be they civilian or military, be they journalists or aid workers. None are safe, all are seemingly valid targets. As much as we can condemn terrorist atrocities committed by the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah, both in this conflict and in those before, they've never gone out of their way to kill as many civilians as possible, as it seems Israel have absolutely been doing. It seems very hard to rationalise how there can be 37,000 civilians dead in Gaza any other way. But since October, artillery, shells, mortars, missiles have been fired at Israeli targets. The north of Israel has had to be evacuated. As much as some, at least in the Israeli army, want to occupy and resettle Gaza, they've got a small problem concerning over 100,000 displaced Israelis from the north of their own country, where things have become too dangerous for them to remain there, and that's just escalated in recent months, with no sign of them being able to return home anytime soon. But where for the longest time, and we were looking towards Gaza where the worst atrocities were obviously happening, in the north of Israel, along the Lebanese border, and into southern Lebanon, potshots have continued to be taken by both Hezbollah and Israel. White phosphorus has been repeatedly used illegally, and this has been reported on by Amnesty International. There was the assassination of a Hezbollah leader in Beirut, which did hit the news, where Hezbollah's targets have been mainly IDF outposts, locations, shooting down Reaper drones like the Houthis have been. It was very tit for tat for months, but something has shifted more recently. Things have dramatically escalated over the course of the last month or so, and that is partly related to the ongoing failure to establish a peace plan and an end to genocide in Gaza. The shift seemed to come after Iran fired those 300 rockets at Israel in retaliation for Israel targeting their embassy in Damascus. It's long been surmised that that attack, which for the most part Israel easily repelled thanks to Allied forces helping to take out targets heading towards Israel, as well as Israel's Iron Dome defense system, was an exercise in intelligence gathering as far as Iran went, and Iran will have perhaps passed that information on to any groups aligned with them, who are supported, armed and funded by them, such as Hamas and Hezbollah, because it seemed to me that it was after that episode that Hezbollah took a view towards trying to take out the Iron Dome missile batteries in the north. They've successfully done so too. Several batteries have been taken out. They cost $50 million a pop. They aren't easily replaced. And with so much ordnance is needed in Gaza to carry on as Israel are there, replacing them in the north, which is of less strategic importance to Israel right now, isn't happening or hasn't been happening. And so as a result, the Iron Dome is getting chipped away at. It's being weakened. It's not getting restocked, replaced, repaired. Their arsenal has also beefed up now, Hezbollah's, using a new type of rocket apparently, and have started targeting Israeli warplanes for the very first time, showing the type of weaponry in their arsenal has moved up a gear, and the group is becoming more dangerous as far as Israel goes. Now, instead of just firing a few rockets at a time, by May, they were firing dozens in one go, notably a 16-missile strike on an IDF air traffic control base. Moving on to just a couple of weeks ago, end of May now, we saw 150 missiles fired into northern Israel in one go, which has contributed to massive bushfires and caused even more Israeli civilians to require evacuation and be taken further south for, again, who knows how long. But 3 days ago, things shifted up yet another gear because the day before, 4 days ago, Israel, at the time of writing, Israel targeted a village in the south of Lebanon in order to take out 3 Hezbollah fighters, which included a senior field commander called Taleb Abdallah, the most senior Hezbollah figure Israel have killed since the events of October 7th began. And boy did Hezbollah respond to that. The following day, they fired 215 rockets into Israel. The targets just on that day were a military headquarters, an IDF factory, an air surveillance station, and numerous IDF outposts besides. It has also been claimed that Hezbollah struck the port city of Haifa for the first time ever, though it appears this was actually the Islamic resistance of Iraq, yet another entity Israel has to concern itself with, because of what it is doing in Gaza, but it flat refuses to stop, and that whilst Netanyahu remains Prime Minister, it is pretty inconceivable that it will stop, because he will always put his political position first, come what may, no matter how many lives, military or civilians, are lost, or at whose hands they are lost at. The day after that, that's last Thursday now, at time of writing, another 150 rockets were fired into Israel, and into the Golan Heights as well, more fires breaking out as a result. Israel's response, though, this is a mad story actually, it's been reported, I say reported, I've got a bit of a video clip here, that Israel resorted on Thursday to using a medieval trebuchet to fire flaming projectiles into Lebanon, and it had me wondering just how short of ammunition they must be now to be firing flaming balls into Lebanon using a 14th century glorified slingshot. That's mad, isn't it? Have they used these before? Is this a thing with them? Or is this really something new and head-scratching? Are they running out of firepower, therefore? Or have they simply not got it to spare in the north, where Hezbollah are escalating things? And things could actually be spiralling into a full-on new war front that Israel will have brought on themselves. Are you going to be fighting rockets with medieval siege weaponry? Now, given that Hezbollah started attacking Israel in earnest following Israel going into Gaza in what has been anything but a proportionate response to the events of the night of October 7th, many will argue that Lebanon instigated this. Others will argue it was Iran, really. They're Iran-backed. The media keeps telling us they are. And it's true, they are. But yeah, they'd like to remind us. And whilst there's certainly likely to be some truth in that, being allied to Hamas, being supportive of the people of Gaza against what Israel is doing to them, they were never likely to sit idly by and watch genocide take place, were they? Allies, remember? Just as many, if not more, people will argue that Israel instigated this too. And historically, it cannot be ignored that Hamas and Hezbollah only came into being in the 1980s in response to Israeli aggression and occupation against Palestine and Lebanon back in the day. I've always argued that these two entities, these groups, were monsters of Israel's own making. Although that doesn't excuse their actions in any way at all over the years, it doesn't excuse Israel's either. The fact remains, though, that Hezbollah, being part of the Lebanese government, are far more autonomous, not living under occupation, and are therefore far better armed and prepared if Israel pushes the point they are trying to make past the point of open warfare. They are arguing right now that the escalation they've initiated is not looking for that. They don't want a full-on war, but retaliation for what they consider an assassination of their man, this commander earlier this week, but also as a warning not to try and go all out against them, something I question whether Israel has the ordnance to do so right now, especially after that trebuchet. But also it's apparently an effort to strengthen Hamas's negotiating hand for a ceasefire. And as I've also said previously, there seems to be no limit on lives that are worth paying for Benjamin Netanyahu to remain in power. If something isn't done to put pressure on Israel and Netanyahu soon, things look set to become a much wider scale conflict here, as has been warned about from the beginning. The Middle East is a powder keg where Israel is concerned, and the fuse is still lit. Meanwhile, for those who might have watched this and find themselves still looking for excuses to exonerate Israel, They've just been added to a list of countries found to be committing atrocities against children in conflict, finding themselves on the latest annual list produced by the United Nations, and naturally they are squealing about this as being grossly unfair, despite Hamas ending up on the list too, it's worth noting. Get the details of that story, which utterly condemns the most moral army in the world as anything but, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.